Planning Commission to order. We will start with a pledge of allegiance led by myself, and then we'll do a roll call.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, let's start with the roll call, starting with Commissioner DeSoto.
Barbara DeSoto. Present.
Any conflicts? And then
No conflicts.
Lisa Jensen, no conflicts.
Robert Knudsen, no conflicts.
Daniel Gonzalez, no conflicts.
Jeff Whitlock, no conflicts.
Wally, no conflicts.
Andrew South, no conflicts.
All right, and first item on the agenda is item number 1, development service requests amendments to the conventional and open space subdivision requirements and the PD overlay. Citywide application with staff member Aaron Ardmore presenting. Mr. Ardmore.
Yeah, thank you. So we're bringing this to you tonight. And let me kind of give you the background and reasons why we thought this is needed. So first of all, the open space subdivision in chapter 1504 has been a little difficult to understand, to comprehend. But it's also, as people were starting to use it in different parts of the city, we saw potential of some unwanted results. For example, up on the East Bench, using open space subdivision could have gained more density than we had probably planned for by using some of the steep hillsides as their open space and getting density bonuses off that. In addition to that, in the recent years, we've adopted the critical hillside overlay zone. That has created a lot of redundancies with the open space subdivision, and the critical hillside provides protections that the open space subdivision was meant to provide. There's also redundancies between the two chapters in front of you tonight. As they currently are written, the open space subdivision and the performance development overlay oftentimes create a lot of the same results. So rather than having additional pages of code that we probably don't need, we thought it's time to clean that up. And again, complicated standards in the PD overlay. There's all kinds of calculation tables and percentages and things that are hard for the development community to understand how to use and for staff to review once they turn an application in. And the timing of this is because on the west side, we see a lot of R1 subdivisions wanting to squeeze together their lots to save on costs with, utilities, streets, things like that. If you can get the same amount of units on a smaller space, you save on those on those costs, which is important in the environment we live in. So for all those reasons, we're trying to implement some of these changes. And while doing that, if you've read through the proposals, trying to introduce some new ideas that would help reach some of the goals of the general plan, affordable housing, different types of housing, different lot sizes, things like that, giving incentives for those things in the package that you have in front of you. And that's all I really have. I've put all of the pages into my slides. So if you have specific questions on a specific page or line, I can go there and we can talk about that. But that's all I have prepared for this one.
Thank you. Any commissioners, any questions for Mr. Ardmore?
I have a question. I have 15 questions.
Okay.
On page 22 of the staff report, it says a final subdivision plan, meeting the requirements, blah, blah, blah. It's talking about if a zone change was granted, then the subdivision, and they don't develop in time, I think it is. If the final subdivision plan isn't submitted within the time period, then the zone change goes back to the way it was before.
Yes.
Is there any, this is mostly just an educational because it's not any language you're proposing, but is there any penalty if there wasn't a zone change requested and they just?
Well, yes. So essentially, we've had some of these situations where a final subdivision plat was approved by staff.
Mhm.
And maybe they've brought a Mylar in to record at the county, but they didn't pay a bond or they didn't get all the signatures they needed in time. After 12 months from the last progress on that, it expires. And if they want to subdivide the land, they're going to have to start all over.
Okay,
the
so they
penalty
don't
is
just
starting
lose,
all
they
over.
don't just lose the zoning. If the zoning was changed, they lose the subdivision approval and have
Right.
to restart. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple places that I noticed where it says planning commission, and I thought you were saying that staff reviews them. So I wanted to point those out to you as well.
Yes.
At the top of page 15 of the staff report or page 11 of the code. The top at E says approved by the planning commission. Should that say staff? Second line, line 240.
Nice. Let me see the lines before that and take a look here.
It's talking about conservation areas.
Mhm. I think in that case, it would be still a planning commission decision
Okay.
because those are typically coming in on a rezone. But let me follow up on
Just
that.
note that one. That's just
Yeah.
mostly so you notice it. And same thing
Yeah.
on the page 13 of the code. So next page over,
Mhm.
line 301. It says that that has to be landscaped as determined by the planning commission. I didn't know if that was a staff decision as well.
Thank you for noting those. I'll make sure to look at that before this goes to city council.
I
Fix it
have
if necessary.
I have a few language questions, but I can maybe save them if we want to wait till we even talk about if we liked it. Oh, I have another one here, page 35 of the staff report. The areas that are crossed out for the R1 zone and the R2 zone. I just noticed that there's no RC zone in these areas that are allowed as performance developments. Does that mean you cannot have a performance development in a residential conservation zone?
Right, yeah, RC
Okay.
zones are just frozen, yeah.
And then the language at line 171 on that same page, in the blue section about garages was confusing to me. Does it mean that we want them to be close or far? Because it says they have to be set back at least 20 feet or located within 5 feet of the property line.
Both, right? So the idea behind that is if you're gonna have space in front of your garage between the sidewalk and your garage,
Mhm.
let's make it big enough to park a vehicle.
Okay.
If not, let's make it small enough where you're not gonna try to fit a vehicle.
Okay, so that's not as confusing as it might be. Okay. Okay, back one page. You guys were so glad when I was gone. I'm sorry. Line 148. Minimum performance standards. It says project on the second line there, 148. It says project plans shall be approved or denied on the basis of performance measured against development standards, blah, blah, blah. Do you need to say by staff or by planning commission in that particular sentence?
I don't know if we need to, but I'll check with Brian Jones on it.
Okay. And then I assume everywhere that it lists planning commission in the PD, that's fine because you do want the planning commission to review those, right? It's just the
Yes.
subdivisions that you don't.
Exactly.
Okay, page 38. Line 255. under garages, it says in R1 and R2 zones, required off-street parking shall be provided. And then it says as required in the underlying zone. So I would just cross off R1 and R2 zones and start the sentence with required off-street parking shall be required as
Oh.
required in the underlying zone.
Good catch.
That's just a clean up there. And then the order of things in the subdivision, I think it was confusing to me when and why the conservation easement comes into play. And I was wondering if it would be better to put it in after the application section, because you talk all about the conservation easement and then you talk about how to apply for the subdivision. So I didn't know if the order of that, which one you have to define first and which one you have to explain first. That was just something as I was reading through, and that may just be because I'm not familiar with the process because I don't review it. But that was a question I had that I was like, why are we talking so much about this? I've never heard of this before. And then we talk about how to apply for the subdivision.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I'll look at that as well. Thank you.
the last one I had was page 27. Actually, I lied. There's another one after that. I just have a suggested rewording. I would get rid of the last 2.5 lines of 32, 33, and 34 on page 27 of the staff report, which is page 2 of the code. Right there. That top paragraph lines 32, 33, and 34, where it says the incorporation of 1 or 2 of these elements into a development does not make a PD. The combination of all these elements is necessary for the development of a PD. I would get rid of all those. And then up above on line 30, I would just say it incorporates a definite development theme, which includes all these design elements of usable open spaces, diversity. So I don't feel like you have to say the last 2
Simple
sentences.
language. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're listing them immediately afterwards, and then you're like, if this doesn't matter or it does. And so that just seemed like for something that was already new and complex, we didn't need to restate that because you'd already defined it.
It's nice to get outside eyes on these because we're so ingrained with all the long written code.
Yes.
That's helpful.
And then the other one was the next page, page 4 of the code, as you have it, or 29 of the staff report. In the first line of the use in combination, line 86, it says the performance development overlay zone may be used in combination with existing conventional zones. I think it has to be used, right? So I would use the word shall, should, or must, because you can't have a performance development overlay zone without another zone underneath it. So I know that that word sometimes matters in legalese, so that one stuck out to me.
Great.
Okay. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
I just have one. So
Yeah.
that's on the density bonus amenities. I noticed there was a lot taken out there, and I'm just curious how that came about. And also specifically number 1, the building variety. Maybe
Yeah.
this is just for my own education, but how that seems pretty loose or subjective. I'm just curious how that normally gets reviewed.
So you're talking about in the new PD right here.
Yes. Page 44.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. All right. So with these PDs, they're producing for us a subdivision plat. So what we're looking for that is first of all on the subdivision plat itself is a variety of lot sizes. But when you're doing a PD overlay, you're also going to be submitting concept floor plans, concept elevations. So that's the way we would review those. And that language came pretty much straight out of the general plan appendices where we're trying to get a variety of housing on the west side. Did that answer your question?
I'm
Or did I miss
just
it?
like defined by different floor plans, exterior materials, or roof lines. I mean, you know, how much different becomes different, right? And eligible. That's the part I'm
Yeah, it
curious
becomes,
about.
it can be very subjective.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, and I think the concern about getting too rigid there is it would take away some creativity that we might want. But I do see your point there, so maybe we can look at that stuff.
Yeah, you don't want that to encourage different that's not nice. You want to encourage good different.
What about answering the other part of that question? Maybe you did, but I mean, I just would like a little more detail about like why we got rid of some of these things like parks and shared spaces, and I'm just curious what the thinking and that was.
Yeah, a lot of that was kind of getting in the way of this PD being used. A lot of it was we felt micromanaging development that we want to see on the west side, where one of the examples is if you had a parking area within your PD development, it had to be entirely walled in. Now, to us, that's not, first of all, not really an attractive look as you're driving through a subdivision, have this big walled off area. So things like that we saw as being obstacles to getting some of these PDs in.
I'm more talking about the amenity incentives that Mr. South was referring to. Like, there's a ton of these incentives that are going away, and basically we just left two. It's like page 44 through 47.
Yes, so it's on the screen.
Yeah. I was just, curious, like, just curious, like, why are these the two we left, and why did we get rid of some of the ones that ostensibly sound like nice things, like common building facilities and trails or parks?
So the two that we kept meet goals of the general plan, and that's why we wrote them in there. The others, like I say, they just were obstacles to getting development.
Could you list them like as a third item, say creative design elements such as, and then say appealing parking areas or energy efficiency, and just kind of list them as some possibilities so that you don't have to rely on staff remembering the intent of the language and just the general plan vagueness. Recreational amenities, landscaping things, interconnectivity with trail systems. Like, I think you don't want to lose those great ideas, even though you're not requiring them.
Yeah, we just didn't want those to be. I like the idea of these concepts, but to get a density bonus from them is kind of where we were trying to get away from. But I think keeping some of the ideas in there as elements in a PD.
Okay, so more like design guidelines for a PD, but not something that gets you a density bonus. Okay,
that's fair.
I like that.
But then why do it? If I'm a developer, why? I mean, I don't know.
Because you might not get the PD otherwise.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess. I guess I'm just saying that, like, for me, it feels like we're conflating things a little bit. It's like I'm looking at this language and you get up to 10 points and up to 7. I don't know. I just feel like the new language is way cleaner and makes a lot more sense. But we just got rid of a lot of the incentives. But again, just a thought. I can see why like this maybe got in the way, because it was a very complex thing to think about density points, and I'm sure it was just very, very complicated. Whereas like the new language on increased density, like the bonus is like very straightforward and clear. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's related to the PD. One other question I have is, I just a little curious about, I read the thing and heard it, but still just have some questions, maybe with a few more examples or details of like the problem this is solving. Like, I understand basically at a high level, it's pretty convoluted. the piece around like undesired outcomes of like, for example, like sensitive areas being developed, I'm not able to like draw that connection there.
So an example I can give, on the east bench of Provo, there's some flat areas that are buildable, where open space subdivision would make sense, right? But the concept that we were seeing was getting a pretty strong density bonus off land that they couldn't do anything with anyways. So they were getting a bonus for nothing, essentially, right?
Because it was violating like the CHADs or something like that.
Right.
On just education question on how this works, like for these density rules, for these for subdivisions, if I, for example, like put a park in one part of my subdivision, can I go denser elsewhere because the density is across the entire subdivision, or is it like per acre of my subdivision? Do you get what I'm saying there?
Right. So you've got your base density of what you could on a standard layout, right? The thing about the PD is you can adjust your lot sizes, adjust your setbacks, squish it all together, provide that open space. And the bonus densities come from providing one of those two things, the way it's written.
Subdivision. Okay.
Right.
Okay. That's what I was just wondering. So I theoretically could make a massive park and then a very dense corner of my subdivision, as long as I'm not breaking the density for the entire area of my subdivision. Okay.
Exactly.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah. Thank you.
On page 14, where it talks about, it's line 230, where it says agriculture and horticultural uses, including raising crops or livestock as permitted in the underlying zone, shall be permitted on conservation land, with the exception of raising of mink, hogs, and other animals likely to produce highly offensive odors in large numbers. Any type of animals in large numbers will produce odor. I don't know why you've got it against the hog people.
And that's
the mink
existing
people,
language. I didn't really.
But you could
think too
add a
much on
lot
that.
of things to that.
Yeah.
Maybe it all ought to say, and all animals. I mean, I don't know what you're looking at here, but
Teenagers as well.
then it seems like on birds, you wouldn't want people to come in and raise turkeys or chickens. I just don't understand exactly what you're getting at here.
And that's, Mr. Knudsen, that's existing language. I just glazed right past that. So maybe that could be a little bit more general.
The next one down where it says animal rights shall not be permitted to any lot smaller than the minimum lot size. So someone with a lot, so it's based on the lot size, right?
Right.
Lot size of 100 by 100, and they have animal rights?
Well,
Or was that not
Of-
what it's trying to say?
no,
I don't,
of the underlying zone. So like RA. zone
right. Well,
has animal rights.
what would be the smallest size then?
Half acre.
Half acre.
Yep.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks.
I found a few more things. On the last two pages. You have red line crossed out, two captions on figures, but the figures are still there.
Yeah, and that's just a,
So those
Formatting
are
thing.
going away.
yeah, the figures related to the caption go away.
Okay, I just want to make sure you didn't miss that.
Thank you.
I have a similarly dumb or potentially dumb suggestion, but it's just renaming the header. It was just confusing to me that the header still says conventional and open space subdivision requirements. Maybe that's intentional and that's why I'm confused, but it seems like it shouldn't.
Where does it say that?
Which page?
I'm just saying, like, so in the entire section 1504, we crossed out conventional open space and we're naming it subdivision. But if you look at the header on every single page, it says 1504 conventional open space subdivision.
Oh, that's just from the web. So that,
okay.
that would
That'll go away.
Yeah.
That's what I just, yeah, I assume so, but just in case.
No, thank you.
I actually was wondering about the name density bonus amenities because they're not really amenities. It's like their requirements or density bonus standards or density bonus. I don't know, because we're not saying you need to have a gym on the roof. We're saying if you have building variety. And to me, that doesn't really fall into an amenity. If it's affordable.
There's got to be a better word for it.
Yeah, I just don't like the word amenities for that description because it should be very obvious what that section's about. And amenities doesn't seem to describe it as your,
I like that.
especially since it's been so simplified.
I'm going to find a better word.
Yeah.
Back to the one about animal rights.
Yeah.
Is animal rights determined by the city? Or is it determined by the deed to the property? Is it determined by the county?
By the zoning on the, yeah. So
By the
city.
zoning of the
Yep.
city?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Did you catch that? So the zoning permits it. The rights are established by the property owner using those rights.
One other question I have is why did we remove this like collective driveway thing? Were there problems with that or?
Yeah, I think it was already, driveway was already a defined term in 1406. So it was just kind of redundant.
Okay. But that's still something you could theoretically develop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Knutson has me thinking about animal rights now. I don't understand if you have to have a certain lot size in a certain zone, why that letter C even needs to be there. Because
Probably
how would you
doesn't.
get animal rights in a lot smaller than the lot size that's allowed in the zone anyway?
It probably doesn't need to be there.
Yeah. We can consolidate our offensive odor animals into one line and we can assume that they have to have the right. I don't know. If you're already cleaning it up, you could throw those in there.
This has been good. I like this kind of working together on amendments. It's helpful. Anything else for staff?
I'm all right. I'm all right letting you sit down. And if we have any other questions, we'll recall you.
Okay.
If they're thinking of any in the meantime. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm opening this up. Well, first, is there any neighborhood or district chair representatives? Okay. Any public comment? I'm opening up public comment for 10 seconds. Because I don't see any members of the public that are identify themselves as wanting to make a comment. With that, public comment is closed. Commissioners, now's the time for us to discuss amongst ourselves.
I love simplification of city code. So the question is probably, do we
want to see the changes that we've suggested written first, or do we trust them to just take it to city council if we were to say, listen to what we said?
I'm inclined to trust development services staff. I'd love to hear any other comments on that, or if there's other items you want to discuss before we.
I don't want to read it again, so I'm really inclined to trust them. It was a lot.
Okay. Doesn't seem like there's much to discuss. I think we all like the improvements this has made, and clarity always is will benefit us and those who want to develop here.
I have
go
a
ahead.
question, actually. I'm so new still, so I'll just play that card. What's the purpose of the conservation lands exactly? It's just to leave it open spaces? Because golf courses, I don't know, doesn't seem very like it's conserving anything.
Yeah, it ensures on the title that portion of the property will not be developed. So that's
Okay.
a good example of is the Despain property up north of Center Street on the west side, where they've opened up the river to do wetlands now. So forever that's been a conservation easement, and that's why, that's helped it not be developed, and now we have it to use for wetland mitigation.
Did they do that in exchange for something? Because isn't that why you're asking, like, what's the
Well-
point of doing it for both sides?
Well, I'm kind of asking, I mean, I feel like equestrian, I don't know, I just feel like golf courses, if the point is to just conserve it from being developed, then fine, but if it's anything about sustainability, then that doesn't really, it's a monoculture, it doesn't really meet
It's not
that
like
purpose, I guess. I want to know, if that's
Yeah,
sufficient to the purpose.
preserving it as open space. Golf course is kind of a gray area of open space,
Or
but
parks
the-
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
City parks are
Open,
basically-
expensive
Yeah.
space, only used by a tiny fraction of the population.
Yes, that's another
looks
part
nice,
of it,
right?
but yeah,
Use a
I
lot
mean,
of
at
water.
least it's, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll say this. I never thought I'd say I'd defend golf courses up until about 2 years ago, when I think I played my very first round on East Bay golf course, and it was incredibly affordable.
It's a public golf course though, right?
Yeah.
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 It's also kind of a bird wetland, so there is some.
Yeah,
there's some
that was
benefit to it.
kind of my question,
And
sort
that-
of from the conservation standpoint.
Erin, I have a question. Are you done?
I was gonna say, this doesn't say it has to be a public golf course, so it's not necessarily
No,
gonna be
you're-
accessible or affordable.
Exactly.
You're right. I agree with you. I totally do. I'm grateful for the ones that are cheap.
But we're taking that out, aren't we? I mean, doesn't this basically say conservation easements aren't a thing in a subdivision anymore?
It's on page 11 of,
Page
oh, 15 of the packet, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Conservation.
You're right.
areas, land uses for conservation.
No, it's still in. Yeah, it's still in there.
Do golf courses fall in the PF zone? Like utilities do?
As a permitted use, I believe so. Yes.
So then that seems to be a logical overlap with parks and trails and things. Much rather have a golf course than a mink farm. Those things are stinky. I do have a question, just so we can understand. This may not have much to do with this language, but I had in my head that we were discouraging PD use. Am I confusing that with like
Pro.
making a pro zone? Okay.
Yes.
So we're discouraging pro zones that are like specific zones tailor-made for a development, but
Yes.
a PD is sort of the preferred method of crafting something special for it. Okay.
Yep.
Were you thinking that too? The PROVO.
Does anyone want to bring forward a motion?
I'll make the motion. You ready for it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I move that we recommend item 1 to the city council for approval. Development Services requests amendments to the conventional and open space subdivision requirements, chapter 15.04, and the PD overlay, chapter 14.31, with the suggestions that we've discussed for Mr. Ardmore to make before it goes to the council.
Is there a second? On the
I'll
motion?
second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead with a vote. We'll start with Commissioner DeSoto.
Aye.
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 And I vote aye. The vote passes unanimously 7-0. And with that, there's no other items on the agenda tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Is there any second?
I'll second it.
Meeting's adjourned.
Don't we have to vote?
Oh, vote, yeah.
Aye.
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 I'm reading your minds. Thanks.